Welcome to the Next Level Casino Careers Show, a series highlighting industry tips and insights from the best minds in the casino and hospitality industry. Enjoy the show.
Andy Parnell, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Kyle. Good to see you.
Andy, just to start off, I appreciate you taking some time to spend with us today. For those who don't know, Andy is the president at Lane Terralever, which is a full-service marketing agency based out of Phoenix, Arizona. Andy, your insight is critical, being the leader of a large marketing and advertising firm. But we'll dive into that. But just to start, we always like to start with what we call the origin story. The 3 to 4 minute backstory, where you grew up, what your interests were earlier in your career, some key stops along the way, then ultimately what you do now. So if you wouldn't mind kind of filling us in there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, born in California, spent a minute there. Unfortunately, my parents sold their house in Manhattan Beach and moved to Carson City. So I'm a Nevada kid, which is probably why I like casinos and gaming so much. Grew up in Carson. After graduating, decided to go to NAU, go Jacks. Kyle and I share that in common, and got my degree. Actually had a major and a minor, major in public relations, minor in poli-sci. My mom was a 5-term politician. So I didn't know if I was going to go down the politics route or marketing and advertising comms. Turned out that I did neither. Upon graduation, my brother was living in Portland. I didn't really have any specific plans, so I went up to Portland and moved in with my brother. Looked for jobs for a couple of months. I got 2 offers, one from a PR agency, which is what I went to school for $17,000 a year. Another from Lucent Technologies for double plus commission for a sales job. So I took the money and I went to Lucent and ended up a few different technology companies in my 20s, really focused on sales, made good money, but kind of got to a crossroads in my late 20s. And I could tell I wasn't giving my full effort in my job. And it's because I didn't really like it. And I didn't like having a quota on my head. So after my last job, actually got laid off, I looked at my wife and I said, hey, I think I'm going to have a career direction. It's going to mean I probably have to start over. It's going to mean a big pay cut. And it's probably going to take me a while to find a job because I don't have any experience other than my degree. So it took me about 8 or 9 months. Took a role as a director of communications for a nonprofit called InPower, which is a Microsoft-funded nonprofit. Our goal was to help nonprofits do more with technology. And it turned out to be just the perfect situation. Although it was a big decrease in pay, I was able to kind of own all things marketing communications, from email newsletters to print to web. And then after about a year and after I got comfortable, we mainly did like IT help desk kind of things, and we'd provide free Microsoft software to these nonprofits. And I was like, they also need better websites. They need to communicate more effectively with their donors. I was like, well, and my CEO was like, well, we don't do that stuff. I was like, well, what if I went out and created an ecosystem of partners who agree to do it for a heavily discounted rate for nonprofits? So what I did is I signed up like 5 agencies: creative agency, a web agency, an email marketing agency. And my commitment was I had like 150 nonprofit clients. I said, if you sign up, give me 50% off. I will give you all my business in this particular discipline or category in exchange for helping these nonprofits. And we can fill gaps in your revenue, your utilization, and we'll keep you busy. They all agreed. They were all gung-ho. So created this ecosystem. After a couple of years, I approached a new partner, a new agency called DeFaro, and spent probably 2 hours at lunch with the CEO, and he decided he wanted to hire me. So I left, was head of their strategy for about 6 months, and then became the chief operating officer, and did that for about 2.5 years. It's actually where a lot of my casino experience came from. About 70% of our revenue was casino focused, both operators and OEMs, actually more from OEMs, IGT, WMS, Konami, Bally, Aristocrat, even tier twos like Cadillac Jack. They were all our clients. So did that for a while, and then decided to make a move to go to a bigger agency. Went to Terraliber, which at the time was the agency of record for Red Bull, DC Shoes, eHarmony, really big brands. They were kind of the big agency in Arizona, and I wanted to work with bigger brands. So I went there, headed up our account services group, quickly became the chief client officer, which is a friendlier way of saying chief revenue officer. Did that for about 7 or 8 years. We merged with a traditional agency, became Lane Terraliber, which is horrible to pronounce. So we say LT. And then a couple of years ago, I got promoted to president, and here I am. So I guess the takeaway from my origin story is that even if you start on one career track, if you get to a point where you feel like you don't have the passion and energy, and you're not really putting everything into it, it's never too late to change and to restart, which is exactly what I did. And it was the best decision I ever made in my life.
It's such an important point, Andy. And I think something that all the listeners can take, because I'm sure there's people who either can relate, or maybe they're currently at a kind of fork in the road, or kind of trying to think, well, what do I do next? And what I took from that story is you were able to catapult because you were actually passionate, right? Like you actually had a drive. It sounded like you were pitching ideas. You came to the idea with solutions. From there, it sounds like that spun into another opportunity where a CEO saw your ambition and wanted to hire you, right? So I think the big takeaway for me is I think a lot of people will fall into the door of more money, more comfort, but eventually I think most of the time that'll fizzle out at some point. Is that correct?
Yeah. And if you have passion, you work harder. I mean, I was never the smartest guy in the room. I didn't graduate with a super high GPA from NAU. But if you have passion and you work hard and you bring it every day, you can exceed and you can excel. I mean, when I look at employees and I look at the people that I hire, I look at loyalty, passion, and hard work probably more than anything. I don't really care where you got your degree. If you got a degree, really, I used to care more about that, not so much anymore. I care about passion. I want somebody who's going to come in every day and work hard and, put it all on the line and actually care about working for Lane Terraliber. And I think that matters most.
What's behind passion though, right? Because I've listened to a few podcasts, I've read some articles, and there's this side of passion though that it's kind of dangerous, because passion can go away, right? Because you could be really excited and hot about something, and then a couple months later it fizzles out. So I'm curious to know from your perspective, if you want to work within the realm of what you do, which is marketing, advertising, creative work, is there kind of some core skills that one would have that would make them a better fit to work in that realm?
Passion, I think the root of it is if you've gotten to the point where you can really figure out the type of work that makes you satisfied and that it's not necessarily a job. I mean, it's always work, right? It's a 4-letter word. And there are always going to be tough days, and you're always going to have to do stuff you don't want to do. But for the most part, if you get enjoyment and you get excited about the stuff you're doing, that's going to fuel the passion. So I think that's really the important part of it, is understanding what it is that's going to excite you. And, when you wake up in the morning, what kind of a job is going to make you not hit snooze 4 times and want to get out of bed and come into work and actually, work hard and enjoy what you're doing. Again, it's not all going to be great, but for the most part, if you enjoy it, you're going to do well. So. I
Andy,
don't
I
know if
know
that
that
answers
you
your
went to
question.
school and you said your passions were within PR and marketing, and then you made that pivot.
Politics.
Yeah, politics too. So let's go back to that. So your mom was in politics. Is that door still open for you? Do you think you still might get into politics? Or
Maybe. I mean, our chairman right now is running for Secretary of State in Arizona.
right?
He's doing pretty well. It might be at some point. My mom is on the Hall of Fame in the Capitol in Carson City. She was the first ever female elected to office in Carson City for our assembly seat. I won't say which side of the aisle she was on, but she was the registered voters were not in her favor by about 15 percentage points. So she
Okay.
was a big underdog. She was a teacher for 25 years. So it was kind of an interesting transition from being a lifelong teacher to being a politician. But she was the state PTA president. She did other things that kind of led her to it. And she got talked into doing it. She was terrified. But me and my brother and the family, I was her marketing manager. We knocked on doors, and she had such a good reputation. Carson City is a small town. So, and she had taught a lot of the kids that were, now voters and now, into their careers. And she won. It didn't really matter what side she was on. She won because she was just a good person and a great candidate, and people trusted that she would do a good job. So even though she was always facing an uphill battle and she was against, the registered voters in the district, she was 5-0. She never lost. Some of the races were pretty close, like 1%. But that gave a lot of motivation to me. My dad moved away to Phoenix when I was pretty young. So my mom has always been my role model. And just watching her do that, that's probably part of the motivation and part of why I've gotten to the position I'm in now. Is just the respect and admiration I have for my mom.
And I'm sure that serves you on so many fronts, because my head goes to on the marketing side, right? So if your mom's the product or the service, right? It has to be good, right? And your mom was that. She was the perfect candidate. Obviously, she was voted. But on the communication side, and you guys went door to door, and like your strategy behind it, right? Like it kind of comes full circle to what you do now, which is you have to have a good product and a good service, and you have to be good at communicating the benefits to the consumer.
Politics and marketing and advertising are very, very similar.
Yep, 100%, 100%. Andy, I was going to ask you this, because you made that pivot, right, in your career, and you started to go down the marketing side, where your passions were. As you started to scale up and become a leader within the industry, any surprises there? Is it related to like things people were doing that you're like, that's not right? Or just take the question where you want, but as you kind of rose in marketing and advertising, what were you noticing that might've been surprises or ahas?
One of the biggest surprises in looking at agencies, I mean, some agencies have given clients, pause, and they've given agencies a bad name because they're a little bit shady. And I think I've seen some of that in my career. And I've always been surprised by it because to me, a common area is media commissions, right? So there's a lot of shadiness for some agencies that go on with media commissions. Like what's coming back on the back end? Like, is it passed through? Like, what's the real scoop in terms of how people are marking up a commission rate or those kinds of things? And it's so, to me, the surprising part is I can't for the life of me figure out why some agencies are shady with that kind of stuff, because it's so short-minded. Like you might have a big benefit for 6 months or a year, but if you want long tenure clients, you're not going to get away with that. And that to me was one of my biggest learnings, I think, as I was entering the agency world, is how many agencies were like that. And I've always felt strongly that transparency is probably if you look at trace or if you look at values for an agency, and if I'm a client looking at an agency that I'm thinking about bringing on, transparency would be my biggest focal point as a client in evaluating agencies. because you might not make as much if you're going about it the right way, but you're probably going to have a much longer term client. So the short-sightedness in some agency leaders is shocking and surprising to me.
Okay. Do you feel on the marketing and advertising front that we move slow?
Yes.
Meaning the way that this is just my opinion, right? And you could take it where you want, but I feel that the way, working with several agencies now, the way that we kind of look at KPIs or we look at reports, I sometimes feel that, we say impressions or we say all these different kind of metrics. When we really drill down though, is like, does that matter? Right? Like, and as consumers change, which we know they're changing, and their viewing habits, where they're spending time on their devices, but yet I feel like this goes back years, right? This goes back into radio before television before the internet, and then web 2.0, social. I feel like we've always moved slow, right? To adapt to consumer behavior. Would you tend to agree?
Yeah, you got to fail fast, right? You learn when you fail, but if you wait too long to try something, technology might have advanced, you might have lost an opportunity. So we have 6 values at our agency that we created when Lane and Terry Lieber came together in 2013. And one of them was focused on this very thing, speed with purpose. It's, know where you're going, have a North Star. Don't just, practice speed or be too fast to where you're not doing something productive. But once you know where you're going, practice speed with purpose and get there. If it's not quite right, like an example would be, let's say a website. Let's say we're talking about conversion rate optimization for a landing page. You can make it the prettiest landing page ever. You can gold plate it. You can do all the things, and you can take 6 months to do it. Well, if revenue is at the back end of why you're doing it, and you could have done it in 2 months, and you took 6 months to gold plate it, you're losing. So speed with purpose and getting stuff done, even if it's not perfect, even if you need to go back and refine, that's fine, because you're learning along the way and you're perfecting it. But at least you're accomplishing a goal much quicker by getting it to market and learning from there and taking those lessons and optimizing what you're doing. And I think a lot of people just they get stuck in the details. This pixel's out of place, or whatever it is. This image is not the best image that we could be using for the hero image on a homepage. That stuff doesn't really matter that much at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I think you're talking to the language of the people watching this or listening to this, which is
casinos move quick. If you don't practice speed with purpose, you're not going to do very well as an agency working with casino clients.
100%. And that's one thing I think you're absolutely right. We work in a 24/7 business, 365, always running, we can plan as much as we want, but we need to pivot and we need to be quick. So on that front though, because, trying to give advice or value to those listening, what are the common things that you see or the themes that prevent that, right? That prevent that speed with purpose that makes people not move in an optimal way?
Lack of a true partnership. We're very fortunate. I mean, in working with Yamava and Palms, we have a true partnership. Your team respects our recommendations and views on things. There's not a lot of red tape. We don't have to go through multiple committees to get something approved. That's very important in my mind, and that's not always the case. A lot of times you're having to go through a lot of red tape to get something done. And that doesn't help anybody out. So I think, having a great partnership and having a collaborative partnership and trusting one another goes a long way in that regard. So that would probably be my, from the gut, that's probably my first, that's probably the most important thing in an agency client relationship.
Yeah. And I think this goes beyond just agencies too, but I could say something working with Lane Terry Lieber and just other agencies in general, what makes things go well and hits on that speed that you're talking about is relationships. And that doesn't mean like we need to be best friends or we need to anything like that, but the power to just shoot somebody a text or the power to pick up the phone and just say, hey, I think we're not aligned on XYZ, and hammering that out. That way that everyone's moving in the same direction, versus I've seen other creative teams kind of wait for the weekly status meeting or wait for the whatever. And to your point earlier, now you've wasted so many days, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, one example, like we have daily stand-ups, check-ins. We use Agile as our methodology. That's the process we use for getting deliverables out the door. And I think it was last week, there was a site map, which is basically information architecture. It's the stuff you see at the top of a website. And the team's like, well, the client's not going to be back for 2.5 weeks, so we have to sit on it. I said, well, how confident are you in what we've done? Like, how many changes do you think there are going to be on a scale of, 1 to 10 percentage wise? How close is it? 85%. I was like, well, how much work could we get done if we sent that to our development team and just got started? Even if we had to rework some stuff, if we get it all teed up, so when the client got back from vacation, they could actually see a working deliverable versus a static site map. We're talking about a few hours of changes probably if they want to move one category item, from the left to the right. I'm like, yeah, I'm like, send it to development and have it ready for them when they get back. And that's that's back to speed with purpose. It's don't overthink it. Like, just move on it. If you think it's, directionally correct, even if you might have to make some changes, just go.
Yep, absolutely. Man, there's so much I can unpack there, but I want to be courteous of everyone's time here.
I know speed with purpose is a biggie for you, Kyle.
Yeah, no, I just think it's a value that I think it's not even just agency or marketing work. I think something that you hit on too there is conceptualizing, right? Like, it goes a long way whether you're pitching something to your immediate boss or you're working with a partner, to be able to present something that they can tangibly understand versus going in with just like a bunch of copy and, well, what does that look like? Well, we got to talk. You know what I'm getting at? I think you can learn something from agencies and marketers who do it well, that you can apply that no matter what position you're working on, is conceptualizing and being able to have tangible when you have those conversations. I want to talk about casinos in particular for a little bit here. Lessons learned there, right? Like, since you've worked with, like you said, on the slot product side, you've worked with casino operators, obviously speed, which we touched on, but anything specific there as it relates to working within the casino and hospitality industry?
One fresh example, I won't name the operator that we pitched, but we had a big pitch on Monday to a couple of casinos, actually much like Yamava Palms, one travel group, but two very different casinos with very different audiences. And one of the people in the meeting was complaining about the sea of sameness. Like, what? We don't even know if like traffic coming to our casino is driven by our advertising and our spots or somebody else's, because they all look the same. They're not differentiated. It's the spinning grin, right? It's the person on the bed in the hotel room popping a bottle of champagne. And you could just replace logos on a lot of this work that I see, and you wouldn't know really what property or what casino it was coming from. So I think differentiation, doing something that's, I hate to say outside of the box, but and it's not that. It's creative for the sake of creative, even if it's well produced. If you're not differentiating what makes your property better and what makes you unique, you're not doing your job as an agency. If we're doing that kind of work, we're not doing our job. Easy, yeah, it's much easier to do it that way. You don't have to think as much. But we we just produced one for one of your properties that I think is extremely differentiated. It's not something you would see from any other casino. I don't want to talk about it too much because it's not out in the general public. But we did another one, I think, that fits into this mold. We rebranded the Stratosphere to the Strat when we were working for Golden Entertainment. And we took a very different approach. It was the theme of it was kind of iconic. And it wasn't about, it's called, it's kind of a demolition spot where you see all these casinos being blown up and coming to the ground on the Strip. And then the Strat, you don't have to reinvent something that's already iconic. You just, you need to refresh it. You need to bring it back to life. And the spot itself, we aired it on the Super Bowl. It was the first time it aired. It was like nothing you'd seen in the space before. And I think that is what catches attention and is what differentiates a casino brand from competition, because there really is just a lot of the same in your space. We talk about it all the time. I mean, I'm not a creative. I was a copywriter, obviously being a PR guy, but I'm not a creative. But they constantly talk about it. They're like, look at all this stuff. It's just all the same. So I think differentiated work, understanding the research and the insights that are leading to a ownable position in the marketplace are really important. And that comes from data. Like, you can't just jump to creative. You have to understand, okay, what are we pulling from? Are we pulling from research? Are we trying to weave in an ownable brand position from a value from the tribe, let's say? You need to have something that's meaningful to get to good creative, but that front end work and the due diligence really pays itself off if you spend the time up front before you get to creative to get to a differentiated space.
Yep. And I like that you said, it's not about just being creative for creative's sake. It's having that purpose. So that kind of relationship matters, is understanding, starting with, well, what's the differentiation in your experience, right? And truly understanding that. And then from there, let the creatives do what the creatives do, and they can tell that story in the multiple platforms that they need to.
And the creatives, I mean, our creative team is world-class. If they don't have a solid creative brief that's fueled by insights and research and really spells out what it is we need to accomplish, they're not going to do great work. I mean, they need that coming from research and brand strategy to really do the best that they can do in their roles.
Yeah. And a lot of times too, I think something the listeners can take is it's usually simple, right? Like I'll take outside the casino industry, just do it. Think different, right? Before Yamava, ours was all thrill. And, I could spend time unpacking each one of those, but all of them are core to the experience, right? Yeah. So sometimes simplicity is involved in that too.
Agreed. It's easier to understand as a consumer too.
Yep. I want to jump, since I have the privilege of having the president of a full service marketing agency. We got to think of a name for this segment, but for now I'm calling it the picture segment. Where I'm just going to throw some things up and we're just going to kind of riff on them. Apologies for those listening via podcast. Make sure you go to Next Level Casino Careers. Check out the episode if you want, but I'll kind of talk through the headlines here. So I wanted to talk about literally some things that I saw articles today as it relates to marketing and advertising, the work that you're in. So Facebook changes users' feeds to look more like TikTok. I'm curious to know your take as it relates to social media.
You're gonna make me talk about TikTok, Kyle?
I'm gonna make you talk about TikTok because I want to know from your perspective, is this as a sign of change to come? Should the marketers and advertisers out there be paying attention to TikTok? Just what's your take on this?
1000%.
Okay.
If clients are not paying attention to TikTok, they're not doing their job and they're not forcing their agency to do the right thing. It's here to stay. I've got two daughters. I have an almost 15-year-old and a 10-year-old daughter. My almost 15-year-old that's the majority of what she does. She's on TikTok. So these channels, these social channels, they kind of come in and out, right? I mean, Facebook now it's an older demo. I mean, it's like a my demo. I'm almost 50. So I use Facebook more than anything, but your younger audiences are not. So, and I know that, some of the younger audiences aren't necessarily cash cows for casinos, but they will be at some point. So it's really important, I think, from a brand awareness and ambassador standpoint, to catch them young, even if they might not be, from an ADR standpoint, they might not be spending as much. At some point they will, and it's never too early to build that brand loyalty with someone. So, these emerging, and TikTok's not even emerging anymore. I mean, obviously it's already dominant. But these emerging social channels, even if there's not great direct ROI right away, you have to kind of look at the funnel and say, well, is it building awareness? Is it building loyalty? And can we capitalize on it at a later point? And if you can, even if the direct ROI might not be as good as other channels, there's still probably a big value there. So 110%. People should be taking TikTok and these, more emerging social channels very seriously.
Yeah, and just a couple other items, and I love that you touched on, but just history repeats itself, right? When Facebook started, when I started, and there's a lot of people in the casino industry that said Facebook's a waste of time. Facebook, don't spend any time there. That's for college kids. This is like 2009, right? But what happened? Within 3 to 4 years, that thing skewed a lot older. And now it's to the point that it's legitimately, I don't know anybody under 30 who's actively on Facebook, but
Nope.
30 and above, yes. But I mean, everyone else either moved on to Instagram. Some people do Snapchat. And with TikTok, it is already scaling old. It's aging up right now.
Yeah. And I'll give you an example of Facebook. So we were back in the TerraLever days, before we were Lane TerraLever, when we were just a digital agency. We became one of the first Facebook preferred development partners, building Facebook apps, and that did it built TerraLever. So we did the first ever Facebook app for Apple, BMW, Red Bull. Like, the types of clients we got from being an early adopter on Facebook was, I mean, it's what fueled the agency. And Red Bull, we were their global agency of record. We built about 75 websites for them. We had to talk them into getting on Facebook and to taking it seriously. Now they're a top 10. I think they're still a top 10 brand on Facebook. But it was work to get them to take it seriously. Thankfully, we were able to. But that's the early adoption, and getting behind this stuff and taking it seriously from the beginning is really important, and it can really set your brand apart.
Yeah, and absolutely. And then one more point before I move to the next slide is, I think you need to become a practitioner too, right? So even if TikTok fizzles out, the point is that kind of creative of video, that's here to stay, whether that's TikTok or some other platform. Your team or your agencies need to know how to be practitioners within that. So by pausing, you're just hurting yourself.
Yep. And you need to adapt, right? I mean, we were used to, 7, 8 years ago, we were used to just mainly doing broadcast video, really, 6-figure, brand spots, 30s and 60s and that kind of thing, big production crews. And it took us a little bit to transition once we started, once there was a lot more digital videos being asked for, whether that was CM related or social or, website related, what have you. And you kind of have to get scrappy. You have to look at yourself and go, okay, well, I know we had, an executive producer and an assistant producer and all these people in the craft food and everything else for these big brand spots. But if we're going to produce rapid video content, we need to skinny up and get scrappy and figure out how we're going to produce this in an efficient way that our clients can afford. So it also forces you as an agency to kind of change your process and your mindset. And you got to be, somewhat nimble in responding to those things.
Yeah. And one more last point on that. actually, I think it was someone for your team said it was like a 1-for-8 concept, meaning if you shoot one piece, you need to think about how you can reuse that across multiple platforms that are organic to those channels, right? And then that, going back to the speed point, man, does that save everybody time, and it's also more effective too. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have a survey in market right now for casinos. So we do primary research for our tier one categories of clients. So casino entertainment is one of our top three, one of our tier ones, higher ed and education, or higher ed and healthcare, kind of round out that top three. And we've done research reports for the other two. This is going to be our first in your category. And, that kind of stuff is, really important in, understanding what's going on and being able to be ahead of the game in the kind of advice and counsel and recommendations you're providing to your clients.
100%. Slide 2 here is, I know you're not creative, or you're not the creative person, but I wanted to get your take. So this was on Ad Age. They were just highlighting how a simple billboard campaign from Netflix has gone viral, social, so for those who can't see, one of the headlines from Netflix says, "Don't give up on your dreams. We started with DVDs." They got one on here, Kristen Bell starring in, and they purposely made the billboard cut too long, a little too long for the billboard. And then there's another one here, directed by Halle Berry, loving saying that, and then Halle Berry's taking a picture underneath it. I think they did like 20 different versions of this, but just curious to know your takes as it relates to understanding, you have creatives be creative, but I think for me, at least, the point here is sometimes I think we get so granular with our impressions and trying to like drive revenue, where there's sometimes an opportunity within that impression to really capture people just in a different way.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, because you've always got somebody like my old job that, is in charge of revenue, who's looking for short-term gains, but they're not looking at the brand building and the loyalty aspect of marketing and advertising. And the differentiation, like a campaign like this is great. It's kind of like, who did that? Tufton Needle did a really good job of doing something that was kind of against the grain, extremely traditional, outdoor, heavy buys, really interesting, catchy, outdoor creative, and just saturated the markets that they were coming into. And it was done in just a very differentiated way, which is part of what fueled their growth. And if you look at, we have another client and they're like, do we even bother with direct mail? And our research showed that they're like, we're trying to hit, it was a home builder. And the types of homes that we were focused on for this campaign were focused on, 20 to 30-year-olds. And they're like, well, we're not going to do, DM. That doesn't make sense for this age group. I'm like, well, actually, it's kind of like, it's a weird, tangible thing that they don't get a lot of mail. And they're so used to email and these other channels that DM actually overperforms for that audience segment. So, we did some initial research, set up a campaign in, I think it was 7 or 8 markets nationally. And it did better than almost anything else. Good old direct mail, like nice, tangible pieces for younger audiences. And it's just because they're not used to it. And it's interesting. So that's the being nimble, right? Nothing remains the same in our industry. You got to continue to kind of rethink things. Once you think you have it figured out, you don't have it figured out.
Absolutely. I'm picturing for the casino people out there, they're probably like, I can only imagine a meeting if somebody were like, I think we might want to just get rid of direct mail. That would not go over well. So just career advice there. I don't.
Not.
Yes, you should always question things, but
not with loyalty.
And then speaking of loyalty, this last one here, obviously we're super early on this, but one of the hot topics is NFTs, blockchain technology. Curious to know your thoughts as it relates to the opportunity within blockchain and NFTs.
I think it's still a little bit early. We're not doing a ton in this space, I would say right now. I think the biggest opportunity for loyalty is data integrity. When we think about customer experience, which we do a lot, we have an umbrella company, Experience Dynamic, we're starting to build a group of agencies that are focused on delivering on full service customer experience. Understanding and having a single source of truth for data, so that you're not hitting people multiple times, or you don't have duplicate records, all of these kinds of things. And I know I'm probably preaching to the choir, because casinos understand their data more than most business categories that we work with. That is, I think, the most important focus area for casinos moving forward, is really being good and consolidating and understanding data, making sure their platforms are consolidated, and making sure that they have a single source of truth with who they're targeting, and having, very clean data that they can leverage. So I think that's probably the biggest focus area.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree. It's still very early, but it is interesting to me that, I'm not an expert, obviously, but just the more I follow it, just the potential technology of blockchain and NFTs. I think most who say that most of them are going to go to zero are correct. But just like the internet rush in the early 2000s, I think the same is going to play out here. Just as you had toys.com and all this other stuff, you also had Amazon, right?
Wait, I thought QR codes were a joke about 15 years ago, and then COVID hit, and then QR codes became relevant. So yep. you never know.
Yeah, the smart contract and royalty capability of an NFT, of those who utilize it correct, I think that's gonna be very interesting 5 to 10 years from now. Yeah. All right, so that ends the picture segment here. Andy, I want to jump to, what the show's all about, right? So I think we've touched on a lot of marketing and advertising that people can apply, whether they're in marketing or not, but just general career advice. For you, I know you talked about being pivots, right? That was a huge one. But looking back on your career, and obviously you still have a full career ahead of you, what has served you well that you would kind of give to others as it relates to, they're just career advice, especially under the context of today's world, right? Where you have so many people questioning. I think COVID made all of us reset in some ways. So as people navigate their career and think about going forward, any tips you'd provide on that end?
Volunteer and make yourself uncomfortable. We talk about T-shaped employees a lot at our agency, which is, we've got, I think 16 or 17 different role types. So copywriter, creative director, art director, user experience architect, you name it. People that are not willing to get outside of their role, the specific role. They might be a pro in one role, or they might be really good in something else. So when I refer to those check-ins at 8:45. So we have a stand up and everybody's around in a circle. And people can raise their hand and say, hey, I need help with something. And we encourage our employees to, even if they're not a pro at something, if somebody needs help and there's a client deadline or what have you, raise your hand, get yourself uncomfortable, do something that's not in your day-to-day, because the more skills you have across different areas, the more marketable you are and the quicker you're going to climb up the career ladder. In my agency career, I've done everything from, I've written ads, I've done copywriting, I've presented creative, even though I'm not a creative. I've done wireframing, I've done project management. I've done probably 80% of the roles at the agency. And what that's allowed me to do is be much more comfortable when I'm in front of a client talking about something. I've probably done most of the things I'm talking about. So I'm much more comfortable in providing recommendations and being confident in what I'm saying. So I think the most important thing, specifically for an agency career, but probably translates to a lot of different business categories, is being multidimensional and making yourself, useful across different areas. And I would say the other thing is attach yourself to revenue or sales in some way. If you, in one way or shape or form, can assist in driving revenue, whether that's being great in client meetings as a creative and being able to sell creative, or being the pitch man, the closer, like whatever that is, if you can attach yourself to revenue, you will move up much quicker than kind of standing, in the back of the line and against the wall and not associating yourself with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's a great point. And, something here, and I think for people in the casino and hospitality industry, talk to your supervisors, talk to your leaders, ask what training programs are available. So for at Yamava, we have the leadership immersion training, we call it LITS. It's kind of the same thing. It gives you kind of the 101 with all the different major departments to understand how they work, the core functions. And I think that's a great point, Andy. And I do think too, that's valuable in that it doesn't mean necessarily you have to be good at everything, but you need to understand their role and how that fits within the puzzle so that you can operate appropriately. On that note though, Andy, was there anything within your career so far where you spent time with and you're like, nah, that's not for me?
Development. I do not know how to code. I know how to look at a website and get to source code and see what content management system they're on or whatever, like layman stuff, like basic stuff. But I would never, that's not my jam. I don't think I'd be good at it. And it doesn't interest me at all. And clearly from my career change, having a monthly quota and a scoreboard on my head is not for me. I'm good at sales and I'm in a lot of our pitches. But if that's solely my job, no thanks.
Yeah. I'm curious to know from your perspective, because that was a great kind of, I think people can take from as a great culture booster, was that exercise you talked about, 15 minutes, get uncomfortable, right? Have that space where people can be open with each other. I'm curious to know, since, the pandemic and coming out of it and this whole work from home, not work from home, what is your approach on that as it relates to being in person for things versus allowing people to work from home? Have you kind of found a good mix within that? You still kind of figuring that out? Any thoughts there?
Oh, I have all the thoughts. We have 2 leadership meetings a week. One's our finance leadership. The other's our product leadership. I'm in both. And that's been a topic of conversation in both of the meetings this week. There are a lot of agencies that are still 100% remote. So in a tight labor market, when we're trying to recruit the best talent, it can be an issue if you're forcing people to come to the office. I had to make a decision about 1.5 years ago. Once we felt like the numbers were in a place where we could safely bring people back, and we've got a 30,000 square foot office and 85 people, so you can keep your distance pretty easily. But we had to be the agency we wanted to be, right? I mean, we get to set the rules, and sometimes you got to be a little bit bold, and you have to make decisions that are going to frustrate people. But you have to do that. You have to have conviction with it if you think it's the right thing to do. So we went to Monday, Wednesday, Friday, required at the office, Tuesday, Thursday, flex. We figured that was a nice meet in the middle, still giving people, some flexibility and some options to work from home. But in an agency environment, particularly for, large clients like you're pulling from 7 different departments. And when you're trying to do that on Zoom exclusively, and you're not able to sit in a room together and whiteboard or put index cards, up on a wall and to feed on each other, you're not getting the best work. You have to have, in my opinion, in-person collaborative time to do the very best work in a creative space. So we feel very passionately that we need that, even though we run NPS for our clients, which is a client satisfaction survey, obviously, and ENPS for our employees. Every single month, there's 4 or 5 people who are complaining about having to come to the office. And it's not going to change our mind at all. because we're committed and we think it's benefiting our clients that we have our employees in the office at least 3 days a week.
Yep. And I think it's something we're all trying to navigate. Obviously our industry, we don't have that luxury. For some positions, we try to find that balance, but I mean, we are a 24/7 service industry. And I think where you can,
Well,
I think
that's not to interrupt you, Kyle, but
yeah,
that's a big part of it too, is the trust and the respect for some of our clients. We have a lot of clients in the entertainment category. So if we would have remained 100% remote and we're working with people who have to suit up and go to the office every day or go to the, your casino every day, it's a little disingenuous. So I think that factors into it as well.
Yeah. And I think something too is it doesn't necessarily have to be or, right? I like it. It could be and. Doesn't mean that you're either one or the other. Define that mix. I personally like that. I think Zoom's here to stay. There's some meetings that we would do in person that goodness gracious, that was a waste. So now to be able to hop on a quick Zoom or a quick
it
call,
has its place for sure.
Right. But not everything, right? So it's more and. I have a couple of more quick fire nature questions here before I get you out, Andy. You're a busy person. What kind of, because there's this quote and on Ogilvy on advertising. It's a good old school advertising book. He says, creativity comes from the unconscious, right? So what do you do to kind of unplug, so that you could be more creative, more strategic in your thinking? What does Andy do? Any hobbies or anything new on that front?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, growing up in Carson City, 20 minutes from Tahoe, I was a big outdoorsman, fishing and hunting and, all skiing and all that kind of stuff. And obviously went to NEU and Flagstaff in the woods. Fishing is kind of my go-to. Camping, just being in the outdoors, getting some fresh air in the pines, is my favorite thing to do. I actually just bought a cabin, up in Munns Park, next to Flagstaff. I get my keys on Monday, so I'm pretty excited. So I'm going to be spending more time up there. That's a big thing for me. Coaching. My girls are both very good softball players, and I've coached now for 9 years. So I get a lot of enjoyment out of coaching my girls. And then cooking. I do probably 95% of the cooking in my house. So I grill, I smoke, I bake, I do all the things. But, if I've had a stressful day and I can go home and just spend an hour and a half cutting stuff up and cooking, I can just kind of check out. And that's a really good stress reliever.
When did that start? Was that like from the jump when you were a kid? Or was that kind of more as an adult? When did you start that?
Probably being having a single mom who was busy and was at conferences on weekends and whatnot. And my brother was already at ASU. He's 5 years older than me. I had to cook for myself a lot of times on the weekends or whatever. So I kind of learned it from my mom, and just being in the position where I had to do it. Didn't do it a lot in college. It was more ramen and mac and cheese and the like, but I always loved it. And then I just started doing it more, and I've kind of perfected it. Not perfected it, but I've gotten really good at it. And I enjoy it.
Because giving advice here, what's your favorite meal that is not overly complicated, but is always good to cook?
If I'm having 10 people over for dinner, my go-to is pork tenderloin on the grill. I'll marinate the tenderloin for about 8 hours. You can do whatever kind of marinade. The side, though, that's really important is the grilled artichokes. So I got this from a restaurant in Phoenix. I Googled what the recipe was. And basically you have to cut the artichokes in half, get all that, the junk out in the middle. You boil them for 15 minutes. You shock them in icy water with lemon. Then you put them in a bag with fresh garlic, olive oil, and then you put them on the grill for about 12 minutes, flipping them every 2 minutes. And you make some fresh garlic lemon aioli, mayonnaise, fresh lemon and garlic. And I mean, you're done. I mean, people are going to come back to your house every time if you do the grilled artichokes.
That's how you know you're dealing with somebody who's like a foodie, right? Because I said easy, Andy, and you're talking about
That's easy. I
freezing
mean,
cold lemon, and flipping it.
It's not that difficult.
My brain's like, oh, that's too hard. Curious to know, did you play video games growing up?
A little bit. I wasn't a hardcore, but I had Atari and the Commodore 64. I think Silent Service on Commodore 64 was probably my go-to growing up.
Okay, that's gonna be my question. What was your go-to video game?
But I wasn't a huge gamer. I was more, baseball, football, fishing, hunting, skiing. I was more. I'd prefer to be outside versus inside.
If you don't get your outside fix, what starts to happen to you?
I get stressed. I need it. It's like it's vital. That's why I got a cabin up north. That's my favorite thing to do.
Fill in the blank for me. 10 years from now, I asked this question to Ricky Tannenbaum, and I really like this. I'm gonna ask it to you. 10 years from now, we greatly underestimated what? So in 2032, what is Andy gonna say? We grossly underestimated what in 2022?
Oh, God, you're throwing that on me. 10 years. Customer experience, machine learning, AI, data, and automation, and learning from it and leaning on it. I think a lot of stuff in our industry is subjective, right? I mean, everybody has an opinion on something tangible that you can look at. There are a lot of things that people don't have opinions on. There are a lot of different, careers and services, vendors and partners you work with where nobody has an opinion. Everybody has an opinion on a print ad or, outdoor or what have you. That doesn't mean their opinion is good. It just feels like most people are comfortable giving an opinion on, marketing and advertising type work. And I think the more that we lean on data and analytics and looking at that versus, subjective decision making on creative, I think the better, because data wins all day, every day. And I think, that the agencies that are in the clients that are putting more time and focus into that are going to win.
And I love that you said guest experience and automation, because I think you're right there. And I think those who can marry the two are going to win, right? Because there's still an opportunity within guest experience as much as we, let's face it, automation's happening, right? But marrying those two, and then also too on guest experience, that never goes out of style. I think that never, ever, ever, ever. And, we talked a lot about marketing, but Trader Joe's, I don't think they spend almost anything in marketing. They focus on the experience and that word of mouth. You talk to someone who goes to Trader Joe's. Actually, I was talking to my wife about this morning. She was like, we're trying to figure out if it's optimal to drive to, to Trader Joe's. But that's the kind of passion that people have. Even when they go on vacation, they're like, I gotta go to Trader Joe's. So there's always opportunity. If your guest experience is right, you almost don't even need the marketing. And we've been talking about marketing the whole time.
Yeah, I'll send you some info on this after the fact, Kyle. But if you look at the data, the reason we built Experience Dynamic, and the first acquisition we made was Convince and Convert, global customer experience, content marketing, and social strategy agency. And there are two more pieces of that puzzle that we need to fill out. One is around data. The other is around employee experience and training. If you can get that puzzle right, so, the brand campaign that we might build for you and the promise that we're making in that brand campaign about what makes you differentiated and what you're promising to your consumers, if that is only in a billboard and it's not reciprocated by the employees that are greeting somebody, on the casino floor, if that's not full circle, it's going to fall short. I mean, it's going to be shallow. So I think the companies that are doing more across the board on that are the ones that are going to win. And if you look at data, if you look at research from Deloitte, Forrester, take your pick, in the profitability of the companies that have focused most on customer experience is like 20 or 30 percentage points higher than those who haven't. And in downturns, they're the ones who suffer the least, and they're the ones who rebound the quickest. So it is the place that I would focus on most if I was a client, is customer experience.
Someone, just a final couple here. Someone who does marketing well, a recent example of someone you like, does not in the casino hospitality space.
Oh, I was going to say Yamava. I'm not pandering. I mean, this has been used so many times, but it really is always, it's been my favorite for so long. I love Southwest because I love the brand and the personality and what they do and their external marketing and advertising, and it's matched. I mean, when you're, that's who I fly with. I don't need a first class seat. I don't need any of that kind of stuff. I like Southwest because it's super convenient. It's fun. The people that work for Southwest are cool. They make your travel experience super enjoyable. So the brand that they're putting out externally is very much matched by the brand and the people that you're going to experience when you're doing business and traveling with them. And again, it's probably the most widely used example, but I love it because I'm an avid Southwest customer and I would never switch.
It's a great pick. And you're 100% right. I think as people are listening to this, think about Southwest in every single interaction you have, whether you're looking at an advertisement or you're looking at their napkins, to your point, whether you're, the staff, all of it's cohesive.
Tarmac, when you're walking up to the plane, and the clever copywriting, the singing on the plane, and engaging the people. I mean, it's just, that's what they do, and they own it, and they're really good at it.
1,000%. One that's got my attention, and it's totally different field, but it's Athletic Greens. Have you ever heard of this product?
Athletic Greens?
Yeah. The reason why I say that, because from the targeting data specific, like every podcast I listen to, they're on there. From the digital Instagram, they're hitting me. They got incredible backing from scientists and other people. I'm not plugging, I don't own the product, but just the way that like they have targeted me in a way that's, it's borderline kind of creepy, but I mean, it's not obtrusive. And you go to the website and it's a really clean website. So that's just a recent one that's come online for me. I'm like, the influencers to the website to the acquisition side, I think they're doing a good job. But the
challenge with it is, and the challenge we have in getting clients to buy into full circle CX is it's got to be top down. You've got to have buy-in from the very top of the C-suite across marketing, CX, CEO. Like everybody has to be in on it. It can't just be the CMO or one person, one leader trying to lead it. It's got to be full circle. And if it's not, you just beat your head into the wall. It's never going to work.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest issue we see in getting people to actually adopt it and do it across the board.
Yeah. And I hope they don't become like a pyramid scheme or something like some other things in those athletic spaces have known to do, but they've just caught my attention. I'll just say that. Andy, I want to get you out of here on the final question I asked everybody, really trying to help people take their career to the next level. 3 tips you'd provide to somebody that they can start doing today that would help them take their career to the next level.
Be loyal. I think loyalty, it's one of the things that I value the most in employees, are just people that respect the company they're working for. They'll go the extra mile. That relates a lot to your industry. Obviously, you can feel it when you're dealing with somebody at a casino that's living and breathing the casino brand. So I think loyalty and really owning that is really important. As I mentioned, I think working harder than the person next to you. As I said, I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but I outworked people to get to where I am. I think that's extremely important. And looking beyond today, and not worrying about what happened yesterday. You can, you have to focus on the here and now and then where you're going. And you have to have a clear vision on what that is. So you have to have a plan and you have to have a goal and a vision in mind in terms of where you want to get to if you're actually going to get there. If you're just reactive all the time, you're just going to churn and you're probably not going to advance that much. So having a plan of attack and having a vision, I think is really important. And obviously with my origin story, embrace change, even if it's real difficult, and even if your wife's really mad at you because you're out of work for 9 months trying to change your career. It can pay off in the long run. You just have to be willing to go through it.
That's key, right? Because you said look beyond today, but at the same token, embrace change. You could do both, right? You can kind of look forward, but have the humility to say, this is not working for me anymore. What I thought was my vision, let's change course.
Absolutely.
So I love it. Loyalty, hard work, look beyond today, and also within that, embrace change. So Andy, this was awesome. Thanks again for appearing on the show. I really appreciate what your team does, and I think you provided some valuable insight here today.
Well, I appreciate it, Kyle. You are great clients of ours. Always appreciate doing this, and look forward to next time.
All right, Andy, take care.
Check out more episodes on nextlevelcasinocareers.com.